This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this StockBox interview.
Joining us today is Oliver Friesen, the CEO of Guardian Metal Resources. Oliver, thank you for your time. We're going to be catching up on the executive order signed by President Trump, that's Section 232, ensuring national security and economic resilience. So tell us, what do you feel about this news when you saw it come out?
Yeah, I mean, it's just another step in the right direction. This is the third, now I would say, major executive order put out in the same amount of months, really targeting what Guardian is doing, which is looking to help reshore domestic mine production of critical and defense metals back onto U.S. soil. So, it's, as we know in this space, it's really so much of it. So much of the success is determined by the timing of what you're doing and the kind of the general macro environment around you. So, we looked at this one quite closely with our advisors. Our take is that this one potentially is the most significant for GMET of the lot so far, and we anticipate more to come. So I think the main takeaway here is evoking Section 232. And if you look back to President Trump's first term, he did the same thing. And what happened as a result of that, so you get the Secretary of Commerce involved, and they evaluate the supply chains of critical and defense metals. In this case, tungsten is very clearly on that list. And they look at ways at supporting Mines in America projects. This is really about, this is an America First executive order. There's no two ways about it. And like I said, in the first term, what happened was the same Section 232 was evoked, focusing on steel and aluminum. And what came as a result of that were very targeted, very directed tariffs on imports of those two metals from some of the key countries, which increases the competitiveness of doing it in America. So they just did it 2 days ago. And there's a timeline in terms of how long they have to go and evaluate all these different supply chains. But we're very intrigued to see what sort of measures, including potential tariffs, that could be in place to support Mines in America projects. So, our view is that this is potentially the most significant so far. And there's probably a lot more to come. And we're going to start to see also the other executive orders and some of the things that are going to come out of those coming to fruition over the coming weeks and months here. So lots of tailwinds for companies like Guardian Metal.
And you said before that it affected the aluminium and the steel industry. So it's at the moment you have to sort of wait and see to see if it does indeed this time round affect the tungsten market as well. I did notice from the RNS you mentioned that there will be a national security investigation, and of course tungsten very widely used in that sector.
Yeah, so I don't want to put words in their mouth, but sort of what happened last time around was they looked at certain metals, and metals of which the U.S. was import reliant from other countries and also unfriendly countries. Those are the metals they actually looked to target, because they wanted to make sure that there was the support network in place to make sure that those metals were then mined or subsequently mined on U.S. soil. So the fact that, if you look at the main data points on tungsten, number one, the U.S. has no domestic mine production of tungsten. Number two, China is the largest global producer by far. And number three, China has put import restrictions and effectively bans in place as of February 4th, 2025. So, just over almost 2 months ago. So those data points alone, I think, really point to the fact that, as this review is ongoing, it will become very clear, and I'm sure it already is very clear, that, when it comes to tungsten, there needs to be further measures put in place to support companies like Guardian. Because if companies like Guardian can get into production, then the U.S. becomes less import reliant on that key metal. And they also look at what the metal's uses are. There's certain metals on that critical minerals list that are less strategic, they're less important for national security. But, tungsten is one of the most important defense metals. So when you add that into the picture, there's no guarantee as to what will come from this. But if you look at kind of past history with Section 232, and if you look at all the data points, we're very encouraged and intrigued to see what comes of this and what specific measures are put in place. And potential tariffs is one of those things, but there's other things that can be done to support mining tungsten in America again. And the reason that's so important for us is we've set ourselves up as the leader. We are publicly traded. We have two absolutely fantastic assets in Nevada, including the largest undeveloped tungsten deposit. So, these measures that can come into place as a result of these measures can be very, very impactful for companies like Guardian Metal.
So this is setting quite a nice macro environment picture. As you sort of mentioned, timing is everything in this space. In terms of how you can actually directly benefit from this made in America, the only tungsten, significant tungsten deposit in the United States. I know you keep repeating that message. What's your plan? Do you have to get to the PFS and then you can start really marketing this to people who can make an impact?
Oh, no, this is on the radar. This is very much, we're not waiting for something to happen. We are in the pole position. And once again, you look at those data points, there's not many metals that are more strategic in the US right now. So, we are having lots of conversations with multiple different groups in the US, as you can probably imagine. They're not waiting for the PFS. Obviously, that's the next important step for us. But we are very much far enough along to be very interesting to a lot of different groups in the US. And as these executive orders continue to fall into place and we continue to progress, of which we are doing at pace, it just continues to snowball and grow. So it's getting very exciting now. And as I mentioned, if you look at the executive orders going back to the first one, there's sort of a time window that's placed on when there needs to be some results actually happening. So the one that executive order that was focused on permitting reform, I think it was a 60 or 90-day window. So what we're seeing now is as these executive orders are sort of staged out, these timelines are going to start to hit, and then we'll really start to see the tangible results. So I think a lot of people are seeing these executive orders and going, great, it's good narrative, but we're going to start to see the tangible benefits. And we already are as a company. And I think the market and the general public will start to really understand what's going on behind closed doors. But it's so abundantly clear to us that the US is as serious potentially as it's ever been about domestic mining, and as they should be, a national superpower or international superpower. And really, they don't have secure supply chains of a lot of metals needed for AI, for defense, for technology, for you name it. They don't have the supply chains in order. So these executive orders go a really long way to help pushing mines in America narrative again forward. And tungsten, as I mentioned, is near the top of the list for all the reasons that I discussed. So we're in a really, really strong spot here at Guardian, and there's a lot more to come, I can tell you that.
Good. Well, let's just finish by just a general catch-up on Guardian. You can bring us up to speed on what's going on the ground, but also recent news just this week as well on gallium. So gallium credits both at Tempaiute and Pilot Mountain there, and those grades, maybe people won't be familiar with gallium grades. I mean, how significant could the gallium play be here?
Yeah, no, for sure. So that's another thing that, I think further enhances the strategic nature of these two assets. And what set this off was we acquired a data set from Tempaiute, a historic data set. And so our geologists were sort of pouring through those old reports, and there was multiple mentions of gallium. And some of the wording was, exceptionally or almost unbelievably high gallium grade. So that obviously tipped us off. So what we did is we quickly took a suite of samples from Tempaiute, but also of Pilot Mountain, because we know that geologically they're very similar. And typically gallium is found in sphalerite, which is a zinc mineral, and we have a lot of zinc on both of the projects. So we thought that the chances of finding some gallium were quite good. So we sent a suite of samples off, had those rushed, and sure enough, we were, what we got there was some really, really interesting gallium grades at Tempaiute, but also at Pilot Mountain. So at Tempaiute, the average grade is around 30 grams per ton. And then at Pilot Mountain, I think it's about 25 or 26. So, average gallium grades in the crust will be probably sub 1 part per million or 1 gram per ton. There's companies who sort of tote significant gallium grades at sort of 5 to 6 grams per ton. So these are significant. I mean, I encourage people to go look around at other gallium projects or other news releases covering gallium. These are serious grades. So what we do now is we expand our sampling efforts. We have our metallurgists involved as well, looking at specifically the zinc concentrate. And that's key here. This is not some early stage project throwing out some metal that, potentially will never, ever come to fruition. We are moving towards PFS. We have PFS level met work in hand right now. And so what we can do is we can take some of that met work and we can expand on that. So this isn't some, pie in the sky. We're just throwing things out there. There's a serious nature here to the gallium grades, and also the fact that, potentially that gallium could be reporting to the zinc concentrate as we would expect it to, given it's typically found in sphalerite. So we're saying these things because there's an actual potential viable pathway to producing, in a production scenario, tungsten through a scheelite concentrate. We have a copper silver and then a silver zinc concentrate, but then going even further and saying, okay, that zinc, now we know there's very, very exciting gallium grades, but there's very high potential that gallium is reporting to the zinc concentrate. So we're just expanding the efforts to see what that could look like. But, if it is successful, gallium, like tungsten, the US has zero domestic production. Actually, I think don't quote me on this, but I know it's north of 90% of total global mined gallium comes from China. And it's actually one of the first metals of which China announced an export ban on. And there's also military applications to gallium. So if it is successful, Pilot and Tempa, you can take another important step upwards. And obviously being so strategic already with tungsten being the main focus metal. So we're looking at all angles, especially as we move towards the PFS, the garnet as well. We're kind of making sure that every stone is unturned, so to say. And like I said, those gallium grades, if I encourage people to look around, those stack up to any major kind of gallium intercepts or project that's on the market there. So just doing the next steps now to expand sampling and see how that could fit into the flow sheet. And then, beyond trying to recover gallium and being the only domestic mine source of gallium in the US would be our ultimate goal here.
Excellent. Okay, well, a lot to play for, really, Oliver. But thank you very much for your time today, CEO there of Guardian Metal Resources.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like, or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.